All right, so let's run through our game plan and check all the boxes and see what it kind of looks like. All right, so the first thing, all right, what are the day's major news events that could impact our trading? All right, so we go to Forex Factory and we check out our day. So today we're going to be focused on June 27th, 2022, and all of our charts are going to be aligned with that day as well. So we can see that we've got a little bit of news this morning. Again, the impact, these are the orange and not the red. Yellow being the lightest impact, orange being kind of like a medium to low, and then your red being your high. If things come in line with expectations, then you generally get a quick bump in volatility, and then things move on. But the red ones are generally where you're going to be, your high volatility events, where, your Fed minutes and all these things that if things deviate from, if the announcement deviates from what's the expectation, then you can end up with a good move that can actually potentially reverse a trend or, again, seem to break all market structure completely, and, it kind of throws everything out the window. So those are the ones you really, really want to be, you want to pay attention to, but we want to be alert and aware of these guys as well. The yellows, I think I filter out the yellows. I don't even have those on there. I just generally have the orange and the red. So again, just want to be aware. You want to be watching the charts at that time. You want to watch the report that comes out just to see, and depending on what you're trading, but most equities and things like that are going to be affected or impacted by it. And then also depending on what the order is, like durable goods, core durable goods, these things have no major impact on any one specific stock. In general, there's other ones, your CPIs and other things like that. Pending home sales, these have to do with, a larger impact on the economy. That's going to influence things like that. But anyways, yep, so we'll check the day's major news events first, so we can see that we don't have anything too crazy going on. We can go ahead and jot these down and set alarms for them just so that we're watching when they come if we're trading things intraday. And so next, what direction is the trend of our longest time frame chart? Is it retracing or consolidating? So let's jump over here. And so we can see down here that, all right, we're looking at the daily chart, and we can see the trend is down. Overall, it's down. We are in a downtrend line here, and we are coming up and bumping against that trend line. So, okay, if it's retracing or consolidating. So, as of right now, it is retracing, and it's coming back up to bump against that trend line. So we can already see that we're going to have some resistance that we're going to need to work through if we're going up, or if the market's going to roll over. This could be potentially where it happens. We're going to have, either way, we're going to have our price action today will be important with the trend going forward. Okay, so we can see that it's retracing. Where are we at in the cycle? Beginning, middle, or end, if we had to guess. So at this point, if you kind of look at these like two separate down moves, right? You can see that things are starting to get tired, it seems, it appears, right? We've already come from one acceleration, and it's already backed off of that and created new lows here, and we've already bounced from there after making this low here. So this is pretty much a poor low. I would have liked to see more consistent price action to the downside. But at the same time, again, we are not in the business of predicting, so we don't know what's going to happen. This could very well just as easily roll back over and head down and make new lows. So, but I would say that if we were looking at where it's at in the trend for this particular leg, it seems to be kind of in the late side. So as far as aggressiveness goes, I don't know that I would want to establish, depending on the length of the trend, I don't know that I would want to establish anything crazy here on a longer time frame. But shorter time frame, we've got room. If we're going to move higher, we can set targets here and up here. So I like that trade. And then we also, if we're doing something intraday, so that would be more of a swing trade type scenario. If we're doing something intraday, market rolls over, we've got plenty of room down here that we can work through as well. And even beginning of a new swing trade to the downside, if we're going to kind of see where if things roll over here, we can put our stops above that, and then our first targets can be down here. And so that's not a bad risk reward proposition either. So that's where we're at in the cycle. So we at least understand, we have an understanding of where we're at. All right, are there any patterns on the higher time frames that we should be aware of? So I would say yes. This is kind of like a triangle, right? Downtrend line here, uptrend line here. Price is going to resolve itself in one way or the other, right? And so we do have a bit of pressure as price has jumped up into that resistance area. All right, check overnight price action and note the important support and resistance levels in play. So now we're looking at things and we see our support levels here. So we can see that this trend has accelerated to the upside. So this counter trend move could potentially be getting a little frothy, but it's still strong, right? So this is not something we would want to come into and just immediately short. So we take a look at the support and resistance levels intraday, what's happened overnight. This is essentially our overnight move. And then these are going to be our support levels here as far as what we can see immediately on the chart. So if we do get a move to the downside, these are the areas that we're going to be initially targeting for a potential reaction at that area. And if we do decide to get short in the day, if price moves lower, then these are some areas that we can target as well. All right, so there's our immediate, price action chart style support and resistance there. So next thing, moving on, where was yesterday's value area? Where was the value area high, value area low, point of control? So let's hop over to that chart and take a look at that. So this being the previous day's area, it looks like we're just above 12,000 here for the value area high. The point of control and the value area low is pretty far down here. So we've had a pretty good range. And so these levels here are pretty far below there. But we do see also that we're getting ready to bump against this previous day's point of control. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when we get there as well. Okay, so these are areas that you want to be aware of. You would want to mark up on your chart if you're not already doing so, and to mark things out and to have this kind of framework laid out ahead of time. Okay, so we know that the overall trend is down, the immediate trend is up, we're heading into a downtrend line, we are at essentially the pinnacle of a triangle, so price action moving forward is going to be pretty significant on this day. So to the upside or downside, right? Price could break out to the upside or downside, so we need to be monitoring both those things. All right, next thing. Did overnight price action run towards or away from previous value? If it looks like the market has had a solid run in either direction, look for it to reverse course. Focus on where we are at in the daily trend to adjust expectations, right? So, based on where we're at in the daily trend is higher, right? Now we can see that the beginning of this move, so this is overnight, so this is from the session starts at like 6 o'clock and then 6 p.m. and this is now 6:30 a.m. We're looking at this as if this was pre-market open, essentially getting prepared for the day. So everything we're looking at is going to be up to that point. So what we're seeing is at the bottom of this move, before we started the up the counter trend higher up towards that downtrend line, right? Within the context of the downtrend itself, we can see that price had quite a solid run. Okay, so when we talk about the reversion to the mean, right? Price does not go up forever. So essentially, if we've had a strong move in one particular direction, we don't want to immediately short that anywhere. But what we do want to be paying attention to is the fact that price is going to retrace at some point, and the question is how far, right? So if we know that if we've gone pretty much vertically into that downtrend line and we're expecting a reaction there, now based on price action, we're expecting a reversion to the mean as well. We're expecting a retracement in price. We go, okay, well, that makes sense that we would essentially test that downtrend line, if the market is targeting that area, and that we would test that and then also test a move to the downside to test essentially bear strength, right? Who's stepping in, and are there any larger players stepping in and selling significantly at that level that's going to change the direction of the trend back to the downside? Or do we end up finding support as price sells off and it looks like we're going to make that breakout attempt to the upside, right? So those are things that we want to be paying attention to as price action unfolds for the day, and as again, as more cues and clues kind of pop up and happen. But as of this point, we go, okay, price has run from 11.7 all the way to 12.2. It looks like we're encountering some resistance above. We know that we're at the downtrend line, which is a pretty major resistance level. So my guess and my bet at this point would be I would already start to be developing that directional bias, right? The initial directional bias that, okay, things are probably not going to continue to the upside. We're probably going to get an excursion to the downside. So the question is where? So if we look at the previous days, whoops, I'm not supposed to see that yet. All right, if we look to the previous days, value areas, right? Again, we notice that this is around 12,000. Our point of control is 11.8, 3 or 4, you can see, and 11.7 for the value area low. So if we're expecting a test to the downside, this would be a great first target. And then depending on our range and where we're at, we've got essentially this low volume area here. We would be expecting some sort of reaction at if we got down to this level. And then the question would be, okay, will price digest this area and continue to move, to the downside? Maybe find, a potential scenario is that we break down below the value area low, and we start to find resistance at this point, and we come down and we test this point of control, right? So at this point, it's okay and encouraged to be running through scenarios in your head. Be like, all right, maybe A, B, C, like what's something I think that could happen based on the current price action, based on momentum, based on these support levels that I could already start to envision happening, and that will allow us to set up different scenarios based on the price action that happens, right? And then as we hit those different points where, oh, it looks like scenario B is playing out, this is where that risk reward looks really good, and we could take that trade, right? We can get our low risk entry, and we could say, okay, well, if scenario B was a bullish play higher, but we're already kind of feeling like price is probably going to move to the downside, but things are looking bullish, and so you're like, well, we want to take advantage of that. So you find that you get that low risk entry. If that doesn't work out, you take your small loss and you go, okay, it looks like we are now moving into scenario A or C, which was to the downside, and this is how we expect that to play out, and so let's get positioned for that. All right, so like we said, it ran towards or away from value. So this is our value area here. It was running away from value overnight. So we're looking for it to reverse. We're looking for it to reverse course, right? Potentially, price can continue to run for much longer than we think is possible, but based on the support level, based on the downtrend line, and we can break through those levels before we move down as well, right? So there's no specific scenario here as far as trying to target the perfect entry. We're just making adjustments based on what we see. All right, so next question, are we in balance or out of balance? If we're in balance, where are the extremes? Note the next balance area that we may visit above or below us. Okay, so we are not in balance, we're out of balance. So price has two options. It can either continue to run out of balance, or it can head back towards a balance area, right? Or it's going to continue towards the next balance area higher. So since we can see that essentially so this is our 30-minute chart, that we can't see any previous price action over here. So we have two options. We can come back to the daily chart and we can look for our resistance area here. Say, well, price is pretty far away from any previous resistance level. So let's jump over to the weekly TPO chart and see what we are up against. Okay, so what we see here is, okay, we can see the move down lower, we can see our bounce, and so this is where we're at. This is current price action. So we're essentially in the middle of this. So this was the, 3 weeks ago. This was our TPO for the week, market profile, and so we can see that we're in a low volume area here, right? So we can see that price actually tapped the bottom end of this little value area here, or this high volume node. And so this is going to be our next potential resistance area, right? This is not in value, but this is going to be an area where there was definitely volume that was traded. And so there's going to be buyers and sellers in this area as well. So as price comes in, we can target these areas as well to watch for the reaction, for the price action reaction when it gets there, right? So, and then we can also set up some new price targets to the upside if the market decides to go wild and breaks out to the upside, right? So at this point, you have this node here at 12.3, then we've got 12.34, 12.4. All those things are going to be depending on the range that we anticipate, and then our major one being the value area low for this weekly chart here. So let's see, so that's at 12.5 essentially. We're at 12.2. So if price decides to go higher, we're only at 100 points range, 150 points range for the morning. So we're in a large range. That's not out of the realm of possibilities, right? But either way, we need to be aware of it. That's an underlying support resistance, or this particularly is an underlying resistance level that we need to be aware of and that we want to be watching out for, right? So that being said, all right, the next thing, oh, bummer. There we go. Didn't hit that. Meant to hit that one. There we go. All right, so next thing, what is our ADR? And based on that, could some of those more distant support resistance levels make sense as a profit target for the day, week, or month, depending on where we're trading, all right? So let's check out our ADR. All right, ADR is our average daily range, right? So this is on a 15 period basis, and you can adjust this, but I find 15 period does a good job of letting me know the trends of whether or not volatility is moving higher or lower as the range contracts and expands, and also just smooths out the range as well. But again, that it is a lagging indicator, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. Depending on how big the range is, you may want to go half of the range. For your days that are going to be inside days, that are going to be consolidation days, you may get half of the range, and then the days that are expansive, where we actually have price expansion and where we're seeking value, when we're moving away from current value and we get a nice run, a nice trend day, then that's where we would want to target the full range. So based on that, so now we know, again, we're here hitting the trend line. So let's go back to that weekly chart, because that's where we're going to be able to see things. Or we can let's look at the day. Okay, so we know, again, we're at 1240, or I think we were at 12,150 at that point. So here we're at 630. Yeah, okay, so 12.2. All right, so 12.2, our overnight range that we're looking at here, okay, is essentially 1270, 12.250. So I think we're at like 150 points range for the day. So that's already getting close to half of the anticipated range, and price is trending. It's been trending to the upside. So the question is, okay, we've got about 200 more points that we can move to the upside if we stayed within our range. And so if we've almost hit 12.3, then within our range, I think what we saw was that 12.5 on the weekly chart, right? That this isn't out of the realm of possibilities. If price action breaks out to the upside, our weekly market profile shows that the value area low is potentially a great price target on the day if we end up running to the upside, right? So we would watch these levels here, make sure that we got through these, and then this being the final target on the day. So, and then to the downside, again, we can look back to our weekly chart, right? So we've got a high volume node here, 12,000. I think that lines up with the value area high of the previous day. And so that's an important thing to notice. And then we also have this low volume area here. So for our high so far is 12.25, and we're at 400. Then we're looking at 11.85, I believe, for the bottom end of that 400 point range, which would be down here. So we also see this as well, right? So we have a nice node right here, low volume area. So we got nice, this would be a nice target to the downside if we got full range expansion to the downside, right? And then also let's take a look back at the daily market profile. So, yep, so there's that 12,000. So the value area, that node that we were just looking at on the weekly chart, all right, this guy here lines up with that pretty good. So that's a pretty solid area to target to the downside. And then also, again, the low volume area and 12.85. So this is probably potentially, actually, that's probably exactly what this is. This node right here is going to be what we saw in that previous week when we looked here. That's going to be this guy right here. Okay, so if we know that this essentially is everything that happened on the previous day, then we can just focus on that. So that's what we're seeing here. Okay, so we've got our support and resistance levels that we've identified on the weekly chart. To the upside, we have our support and resistance levels that we've identified to the downside on our market profile and through price action. Here, these guys here, including up to and including this trend line as well. And then, what else? There was one other thing. Yes, the VWAPs. So, let's take a quick look here. So we notice that the previous close, so this 27th date, that's Monday, right? So we got our Sunday night price action, early Monday morning price action. So Friday's VWAP close was at 12,024. So again, that's exactly where that value area low was on the market profile. So again, one of the main things that I look for as well is going to be your confluence areas, right? So confluence being multiple support and resistance levels, whether underlying or obvious, lining up together, right? So if we have the value area high plus the previous week's value area high plus the previous week's VWAP closing, plus we have obvious chart support, a support level there, that's 3 different levels of potential support. So in my opinion, and what usually works, you know, the way that I like to target my trades is those are the areas where I want to be looking at getting an entry, because we're almost guaranteed to get a response at that point. So if it's a strategic entry, so like for that, with it being below us, that would be, that would say, okay, well, we're at 12,200, we hit for the high. That area is around 12,000, so that would be half the ADR, half your daily range at that point. That could be a potential area to get long if the market is going to continue to break out to the upside, and we're going to break that daily downtrend line. So those are things that I'll be thinking about and looking at as far as getting positioned, and we'll talk more about that when we go into the entry part of the section. But those are some things that I'll be looking to target. I'll be looking for overlapping support and resistance levels to expect some sort of reaction, market reaction, and then if we can line that up with essentially a low risk trade idea, then the more the better, right? So, all right, let's run through this here. So remember that this is very important, just because we are wanting to get in sync with the market. And I've taken 26 minutes now to run through this stuff at a more intimate level. But again, this takes about 5 minutes because we've only looked at four different type of charts, right? We looked at a daily chart, we've looked at the market profile daily and weekly chart, and we've looked at a couple different of my 30-minute charts that I use. So again, to run through each one, identify and mark out those support and resistance levels to get an idea and a feel for the price action that's happening, to understand where we're at in the trend, any potential patterns, support and resistance, and then whether or not we are expecting a reversion to the mean or price expansion move outside of and away from value. Those things are going to give you essentially everything you need to be able to structure the day, structure the market in its current environment, and be able to essentially plan your trade around those areas and start implementing risk. And then it just becomes a matter of, okay, well, how close are we to actually one of our trade ideas setting up to where it makes sense for us to enter? And oftentimes that's not going to be when we first look at the chart. That's going to be when we once we go through this information, now we're going to begin to stock the chart for a trade to set up, right? So again, some days are going to be clearer than others. A lot of times things are going to be a little bit messy, and so that's part of why we do this. This is going to get you in sync and get you having a feel for the price action and where things are going to go or potentially go. So anyways, again, hope you got value out of this. And hopefully it should answer a lot of the questions from, again, putting the visual to the written word. So we have our questions, and now I've laid out that entire process and more. So I'll see you in the next section.